The night everything changed, a wheelchair-bound billionaire CEO sat humiliated in front of dozens of strangers while her blind date called her damaged goods. But when a grease-stained mechanic stepped forward, neither of them knew this moment would shatter every wall between two impossible worlds. Welcome to a story that will take you through heartbreak healing and the kind of love that defies every odd. Stay with me until the very end and drop a comment about what city you're watching from, so I can see how far this story travels across the world. Part 1: The Shattered Beginning. The crystal chandelier cast dancing shadows across the marble floors of Le Bernardin, Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant, where reservations were booked 3 months in advance, and the wine list read like a small fortune. Isabel Hartley adjusted the silk scarf around her shoulders, her manicured fingers gripping the armrests of her wheelchair as she navigated between tables laden with white orchids and gleaming silverware. At 28, Isabel commanded boardrooms with the same precision that had built Hartley Biotech into a $3 billion empire. Her auburn hair fell in perfect waves past her shoulders, framing a face that belonged on magazine covers, high cheekbones, emerald eyes that could freeze a room, and lips that curved just enough to suggest both intelligence and mystery. Tonight, however, those same features were touched with an unfamiliar nervousness. "Table for two under Hartley," she told the maitre d', who glanced down at her wheelchair, with that particular expression she'd grown to despise, part pity, part uncomfortable politeness. "Of course, Ms. Hartley. Right this way." The accident had happened 5 years ago. A drunk driver running a red light. Her Maserati crumpled like paper, and 3 surgeries that couldn't restore feeling below her waist. The headlines had been merciless: "Biotech Princess Falls from Grace." "The Crippled Heiress. Can Hartley Industries survive its broken leader?" She'd proven them all wrong, doubling the company's value from her wheelchair, but the whispers never stopped. Her father, William Hartley, had arranged tonight's dinner. "Marcus Thornfield," he'd said over breakfast in their Fifth Avenue penthouse. Harvard MBA family fortune in real estate, political connections that stretched to Washington. Perfect match for expanding our East Coast operations. Isabel had wanted to refuse, but the board meeting next week loomed large. Shareholders were questioning whether a disabled CEO could handle the upcoming merger with German pharmaceutical giant Bayer Kern. One photograph of her with the right man might silence the doubts. She reached the corner table, positioned perfectly for privacy, yet visible enough to be noticed. The view overlooked Central Park, where autumn leaves painted the landscape in shades of gold and crimson. Isabel ordered a glass of Chateau d'Yquem liquid gold at $400 a bottle, and waited. Marcus Thornfield arrived 20 minutes late, his silver Rolex catching the light as he strode through the restaurant. Tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of jaw that suggested generations of good breeding and better dental work. His navy suit probably cost more than most people's cars. "Isabel Hartley," he said, extending a hand. "Marcus Thornfield. Sorry I'm late, conference call ran long." She shook his hand, noting the firm grip that lasted exactly 2 seconds longer than necessary. "No problem. Please sit." Marcus settled into his chair, signaling the sommelier with practiced ease. "I'll have the Macallan 25 neat, and bring us your tasting menu, the 7-course option." He hadn't asked what she wanted. Strike one. "So," Marcus said, leaning back with the confidence of a man who'd never been told no. "William tells me you run the family business. That must be challenging." The way he said challenging made it clear he meant something else entirely. "Biotech isn't for everyone," Isabel replied carefully. "But we've had 3 consecutive years of record growth." Right. Though I imagine the day-to-day operations fall to your management team now." His eyes flicked down to her wheelchair, then back up with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Must be nice having people handle the heavy lifting. Strike 2. The first course arrived cushy oysters with champagne mignonette. Marcus ordered for both of them again, selecting items that required standing to properly appreciate the presentation. Each choice felt deliberate, pointed. "Tell me about yourself," Isabel said, determined to salvage the evening. "What drives you in real estate?" Marcus launched into a monologue about his latest acquisition, a historic building in Soho that he planned to gut and convert into luxury condominiums. The previous owners were too sentimental about preserving character. Sometimes you have to tear things down to build something better. He gestured broadly, nearly knocking over the wine glasses. "Like my grandfather always said, weak foundations make weak buildings. Better to start fresh than try to fix what's already broken." The words hit like a physical blow. Isabel's fingers tightened around her wine glass, the crystal stem threatening to snap. "Speaking of which," Marcus continued, oblivious to her reaction, "I have to ask, how does this work? I mean, practically speaking, the wheelchair thing." The restaurant seemed to grow quieter around them. Isabel could feel eyes turning in their direction, conversations pausing, as nearby diners strained to hear. "I'm not sure what you mean," she said quietly. Marcus leaned forward, lowering his voice in a way that somehow made it carry further. "Come on, we're both adults here. Physical compatibility matters in a relationship. I need to know what I'm working with." The blood drained from Isabel's face. "Excuse me. Look, you're beautiful, and the family connections are obviously attractive. But let's be realistic about limitations. I'm not running a charity here." The words hung in the air like toxic gas. At the table beside them, an elderly woman gasped audibly. The couple near the windows had stopped eating entirely, their forks suspended mid-air as they stared. "I think," Isabel said, her voice steady despite the rage building behind her ribs, "there's been a misunderstanding." "Has there?" Marcus signaled for the check, his movement sharp and dismissive. "Your father painted a pretty clear picture, successful business arrangement, beneficial for both families. But he didn't mention the complications." "Complications? Damaged goods, sweetheart. I don't mean to be cruel, but I have a reputation to maintain. The Thornfield name means something in this city." The restaurant had gone completely silent now. Isabel could feel 40 pairs of eyes on her, watching her humiliation unfold like a car crash in slow motion. Her cheeks burned with shame and fury, but she kept her spine straight, her chin high. "You're right," she said, reaching for her purse. "There has been a misunderstanding. I thought I was meeting a man, not a waste of perfectly good oxygen." Marcus laughed, actually laughed, the sound carrying across the marble floors. "That's rich coming from someone who can't even walk out of here under her own power." The words landed like a slap. Around them, diners began pulling out phones, the modern instinct to document others' pain in real time. Isabel could already see tomorrow's headlines: "Billionaire heiress humiliated on blind date. The fall of a fallen angel." She fumbled for her wheelchair controls, desperate to escape before the tears came. Her hands shook as she tried to navigate around the table, but Marcus had positioned his chair to block her passage. "Excuse me," she said, her voice cracking despite her efforts to stay strong. "What's the magic word?" Marcus grinned, clearly enjoying her distress. That's when the mechanic walked in. He wasn't supposed to be there. Le Bernardin didn't serve people in oil-stained work shirts and scuffed boots. But somehow, Liam Walker had made it past the maitre d', his dark eyes scanning the room until they landed on the scene unfolding in the corner. Liam was 31, built like someone who'd earned his muscles through honest work rather than expensive gym memberships. His black hair was perpetually mussed, his hands permanently stained despite scrubbing, and he had the kind of face that looked like it had stories to tell, strong jaw, serious eyes, and a mouth that smiled easily when it had reason to. He'd come to return a watch, a Patek Philippe, that some rich customer had left in his Lamborghini after an oil change. The guy had been frantic on the phone, offering a $5,000 reward for its safe return. Liam didn't want the money, but he'd promised to drop it off before closing time. But now seeing the woman in the wheelchair trapped by the man's cruelty, while a room full of people watched and recorded something, shifted in his chest. "Problem here." Liam's voice cut through the silence like a blade. Marcus looked up, his expression shifting from amusement to annoyance. "I'm sorry. Who are you, kitchen staff?" "Someone who knows the difference between a man and a mistake," Liam replied, stepping closer. "And right now you're looking like the second one." "Listen, buddy, this is a private conversation." "Conversation's over." Liam moved Marcus's chair aside with one hand, creating a clear path for Isabel. "Ma'am, would you like me to call you a car?" Isabel looked up at this stranger, this mechanic in work clothes, who'd appeared like something out of a fairy tale, and felt something crack open in her chest. Not the defensive walls she'd built, but something deeper, something that had been holding her together through pure will. Yes. Thank you." Marcus stood up, his face flushing red. "Do you have any idea who you're talking to?" "This is Marcus Thornfield. My family owns half the buildings in this city." "Congratulations," Liam said without looking at him. "Mine fixes the cars that drive past them." He turned his attention back to Isabel, and she found herself caught in eyes the color of storm clouds, gray with flecks of blue that seemed to see right through her carefully constructed armor. "There's a side exit through the kitchen," he said quietly. "Less cameras that way." "You can't just—" Marcus sputtered, but his protest died when Liam finally turned those storm-gray eyes on him. "Can't what? Show basic human decency? Apparently, that's something they don't teach at Harvard." The crowd was murmuring now, phones still recording, but the narrative had shifted. Instead of watching a woman's humiliation, they were witnessing something else entirely, a rescue that had nothing to do with money or status, and everything to do with simple kindness. Liam gestured toward the kitchen, and Isabel found herself following this stranger who'd appeared out of nowhere to save her dignity. As they moved through the restaurant, she caught fragments of whispered conversations. "Who is that guy? Did you see his hands? Definitely blue collar." "She's Isabel Hartley, the biotech billionaire." Cinderella story in reverse. The kitchen was a symphony of controlled chaos, chefs shouting orders, flames leaping from pans, the constant clatter of plates and silverware. The staff barely glanced at them as Liam led her through the maze of stainless steel counters toward the delivery entrance. "You didn't have to do that," Isabel said as they reached the door. Liam shrugged, holding it open for her. "Seemed like you could use an exit strategy." The alley behind the restaurant was quiet, lit by a single fluorescent bulb that cast everything in harsh white light. The contrast from the restaurant's warm elegance was jarring dumpsters, fire escapes, the distant sound of traffic from the street. "I'm Isabel," she said, suddenly aware that she was in an alley with a complete stranger. But somehow she felt safer here than she had in the restaurant, surrounded by her own kind. "Liam Walker." He pulled out his phone. "What's your car service?" I don't have one. I was supposed to ride home with." She gestured vaguely back toward the restaurant, then laughed a sound somewhere between humor and hysteria. "God, what a disaster." "Hey." Liam crouched down so they were at eye level, his voice gentle. "That wasn't your disaster. That was his. Big difference." For a moment they just looked at each other. Isabel felt something she hadn't experienced in years, the sensation of being truly seen by someone who wasn't calculating her net worth, or political connections, or what she could do for them. "Why did you help me?" she asked. Liam considered the question seriously. "My mom taught me that how you treat people when they're down tells you everything about who you really are. That guy in there." He shook his head. "Some people mistake cruelty for strength. And you, what do you mistake?" A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Fixing things for understanding them." Before Isabel could ask what he meant, a black sedan pulled into the alley. Liam stood up, raising his hand. "Car service," he explained. "Friend of mine drives nights." The driver, a middle-aged black man with kind eyes and a Yankees cap, rolled down his window. "You the one who called Liam?" "Yeah, Tommy. This is Isabel. She needs a ride home." Tommy's eyes flicked to the wheelchair, then to Isabel's dress, clearly calculating the distance between this alley and whatever world she belonged to. But all he said was, "No problem. Got a ramp in the back." As Tommy prepared the vehicle, Isabel found herself reluctant to leave. Something about this moment, this strange, unexpected rescue, felt too important to end. "The watch," she said, suddenly noticing the small box in Liam's jacket pocket. "You came here to return something." Liam looked surprised that she'd noticed. Customer left it in his car. Seemed important to him. "You could have mailed it, or kept it. It's probably worth more than most people make in a year." "Probably," Liam shrugged. "But it wasn't mine." Such a simple statement, but it revealed everything about the difference between him and Marcus Thornfield. One man who took what he wanted, another who returned what wasn't his. "Ms. Hartley," Tommy called. "Ready when you are." Isabel moved toward the car, then stopped. "Liam, yeah. Would you... I mean, if you're not busy tomorrow night, would you like to get dinner? Somewhere less..." She gestured toward the restaurant. "Pretentious." Liam's eyebrows rose. "You want to have dinner with me?" "I want to have dinner with someone who sees people instead of price tags." For a long moment, he didn't answer. Isabel felt her cheeks flush, suddenly aware of how this must look, the billionaire CEO trying to collect her working-class hero like some kind of trophy. "I know a place," Liam said finally. "Food trucks on the Lower East Side. Best tacos in the city." "Food trucks," Isabel repeated, and found herself smiling for the first time all evening. "I've never eaten from a food truck." "Then you've been missing out." As Tommy helped her into the sedan, Isabel felt something she hadn't experienced since before the accident: anticipation for tomorrow. Not for a board meeting or a business dinner, but for tacos from a truck with a man who fixed things and returned watches that weren't his. 7 o'clock, Liam asked as Tommy closed the door. 7 o'clock, she confirmed through the window. As the sedan pulled away, Isabel watched Liam in the side mirror until he disappeared into the shadows of the alley. Behind them, Le Bernardin glowed like a jewel box full of people who would spend the rest of the evening dissecting what they'd witnessed. But for the first time in years, Isabel Hartley didn't care what anyone else thought. Tomorrow, she was going to eat tacos from a truck with a mechanic who'd saved her dignity without expecting anything in return. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through the messages that had already started arriving. Reporters wanting statements, socialites fishing for gossip, her father demanding an explanation. She deleted them all and instead found herself thinking about storm-gray eyes and oil-stained hands that had moved a chair aside so she could escape. "Where to, miss?" Tommy asked, glancing in the rearview mirror. "Home," Isabel said, then paused. "Actually take the long way, through Central Park." As they drove through the tree-lined paths where autumn leaves danced in the headlights, Isabel pressed her face to the window and allowed herself to hope. For the first time since the accident, she wasn't thinking about what she'd lost. She was thinking about what she might find. Back in the alley, Liam stood alone for a moment, turning the small jewelry box over in his hands. Inside was a watch worth more than his garage made in 6 months. He should have given it to Isabel, let her return it to whatever social circle produced men like Marcus Thornfield. But something told him that tomorrow night, eating tacos under string lights with a woman who'd never seen the world from his angle might be worth more than all the Patek Philippe's in Manhattan. He walked back into Le Bernardin to complete his delivery, ignoring the stares and whispers that followed him through the dining room. The maitre d' looked horrified to see him again, but Liam simply asked for Marcus Thornfield's table. Marcus was still there entertaining his dinner companions, with what was undoubtedly a very different version of the evening's events. He looked up as Liam approached, his expression shifting from annoyance to alarm. "You've got some nerve coming back here." Liam placed the jewelry box on the table. "Your watch. Left it in your Lamborghini this afternoon." Marcus's mouth fell open as he recognized the Patek Philippe. How did you—" "Like I said," Liam replied, turning to leave. "I fix things." As he walked away, he heard Marcus fumbling with explanations to his confused dinner companions. But Liam was already thinking about tomorrow, about yellow string lights and laughter that had nothing to do with business deals or family fortunes. For the first time in his 31 years, Liam Walker was looking forward to showing someone his world. Someone who might understand that the best things in life couldn't be bought, only shared. The autumn wind carried the scent of possibility as he stepped back into the night, leaving behind the crystal and marble for something infinitely more valuable, the promise of seeing Isabel Hartley smile again. The next evening, Isabel found herself staring at her walk-in closet with the same intensity she usually reserved for hostile takeover negotiations. Rows of designer suits, cocktail dresses, and evening gowns hung in perfect symmetry, each piece carefully selected to project power, sophistication, and untouchable success. None of them seemed right for eating tacos from a food truck. She'd dismissed her stylist 3 times, finally settling on dark jeans, the first pair she'd worn since the accident, and a soft cashmere sweater in deep emerald. Simple pearl earrings instead of the diamonds that usually graced her ears. As she transferred from her bed to her everyday wheelchair, she caught her reflection in the mirror and barely recognized herself. "You look different tonight, Miss Isabel," Rosa observed from the doorway. The housekeeper had worked for the Hartley family for 15 years, watching Isabel grow from a rebellious teenager into a formidable businesswoman. "Nervous, but happy nervous." "Is there such a thing?" Isabel asked, adjusting her sweater one final time. "Sí, mija. The good kind of nervous. Like before something wonderful." Downstairs, William Hartley waited in his study nursing a glass of 30-year-old scotch beside a fire that cast dancing shadows across leather-bound first editions and oil paintings of stern-faced ancestors. The morning's newspapers were spread across his mahogany desk, all featuring various versions of last night's restaurant incident. "Biotech heiress rescued by mystery man," he read aloud as Isabel entered. "Cinderella story takes unexpected turn." The Times was kinder, but the Post— he held up a tabloid with the headline, "Wheelie Bad Date," above photos of her leaving through the kitchen. "This is exactly the kind of publicity we can't afford right now." "Good evening to you too, Father." William's steel-gray eyes, so similar to her own, fixed on her outfit. "Where are you going dressed like that?" "Dinner." "With whom?" "Because if you're meeting another potential suitor, we need to discuss damage control strategies." I'm having tacos with the man who helped me last night. The words hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. William's glass stopped halfway to his lips. Tacos, he repeated slowly. From a food truck. On the Lower East Side. Isabel. Her father's voice took on the tone he used in hostile board meetings. Tell me you're not serious. I'm completely serious. William stood moving to the window that overlooked Central Park. Even from 30 floors up, the city sprawled below them like a kingdom he'd spent his life conquering. Do you have any idea what the board will say when they hear about this? We're 3 weeks away from the Bayer-Kern vote. Shareholders are already questioning your leadership capabilities after the accident. Now you're gallivanting around with some mechanic. His name is Liam Walker. I don't care if his name is Liam Shakespeare. He's nobody, Isabel. A distraction you can't afford. Isabel maneuvered her wheelchair to face him directly. He's someone who treated me like a human being instead of a business opportunity. Marcus Thornfield is the son of one of the most influential families on the East Coast. His father sits on the Federal Reserve Board. One dinner gone wrong doesn't erase the potential. He called me damaged goods in front of 40 people. William's expression didn't change. Politics requires thick skin, but the casual cruelty of the statement hit like a physical blow. This isn't politics. This is my life. Your life affects thousands of employees, millions of shareholders, and the future of medical research. You don't have the luxury of personal indulgences. For a moment, father and daughter stared at each other across the chasm that had opened between them 5 years ago. Once they'd been partners in building an empire. Now they were adversaries fighting over the same crown. I'm going, Isabel said quietly. If you walk out that door, I'll roll out that door, and unless you plan to physically stop me, this conversation is over. She moved toward the elevator, but William's voice followed her. He'll break your heart, Isabel. Men like that always do. They see dollar signs, not love. The elevator doors closed on her father's words, but they echoed in her mind as she descended toward the lobby. Maybe he was right. Maybe this was just another fairy tale that would end in disappointment. But as the car service pulled up to the address Liam had given her, Isabel realized she didn't care about maybe. For the first time in years, she was choosing hope over fear. The Lower East Side at 7 o'clock on a Thursday evening was a symphony of controlled chaos. Food trucks lined the streets like colorful sentinels, their windows glowing warmly against the October chill. The air carried a dozen different aromas, grilled onions, fresh cilantro, charcoal smoke, and spices that made Isabel's mouth water, despite her nerves. She spotted Liam immediately standing beside a truck painted bright yellow, with Estrella's Kitchen written in flowing red script. He'd changed out of his work clothes into dark jeans and a gray sweater that brought out his eyes, but his hair was still slightly mussed, as if he'd run his hands through it while waiting. You came, he said, and the relief in his voice made her chest tight. You sound surprised. Little bit. Figured you might have second thoughts about slumming it with the working class. Isabel studied his face, looking for signs of sarcasm or bitterness, but found only genuine uncertainty. The only second thoughts I had were about whether I should have brought a bigger appetite. Liam's smile transformed his entire face, erasing the cautious guardedness she'd noticed the night before. In that case, you're in luck. Estrella makes the best carnitas in the city, and I've done extensive research. Extensive research? I may have eaten here 3 times this week to make sure the quality was consistent. Despite her nerves, Isabel laughed. That's very thorough of you. I take food recommendations seriously. My reputation is on the line here. As they approached the truck, a woman in her 50s leaned out the service window, Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and her smile could have powered the entire block. "Liam, you're back again, and you brought a friend." Estrella's eyes twinkled as she took in Isabel's wheelchair and clearly expensive clothes. "First time eating from a truck, mija." "Is it that obvious?" Isabel asked. "Honey, I've been cooking street food for 20 years. I can spot truck virgins from a mile away. But don't worry, I'll take good care of you." Within minutes, they were seated at a small folding table Liam had set up beside his truck, a battered Chevy pickup that looked like it had seen better decades. Paper plates held an array of tacos that looked nothing like the carefully plated Mexican cuisine Isabel was accustomed to. These were messy, authentic, and absolutely perfect. "So," Liam said, watching her take her first bite of carnitas taco verdict. Isabel's eyes widened as flavors exploded across her tongue. Tender pork, sharp onions, fresh cilantro, and lime that made everything sing. She'd eaten at Michelin-starred restaurants around the world, but nothing had ever tasted quite like this. "This is incredible," she managed around her mouthful. "Better than Le Bernardin. Different universe than Le Bernardin." They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching the evening crowd flow past. College students sharing plates of dumplings, construction workers grabbing quick dinners before heading home, couples on dates who couldn't afford fancy restaurants, but looked infinitely happier than anyone at the previous night's disaster. "Can I ask you something?" Isabel said, dabbing hot sauce from her chin with a napkin. "Shoot. Why did you really help me last night? And don't say it was just because your mother raised you right." Liam set down his taco, considering the question seriously. "You want the real answer? I want the truth." I recognize the look on your face. That moment when you realize someone sees you as less than human because of something you can't control. He met her eyes. "I spent most of my childhood getting that look." "What do you mean, foster kid?" "Bounced around the system until I was 18. Amazing how quickly people write you off when they find out you don't have a real family." The casual way he said it made the revelation hit harder. Isabel set down her own food, suddenly understanding the steel beneath his gentle demeanor. "How many homes?" 7 from age 6 to 18. Some were okay, some," he shrugged. "Some taught me that cruelty doesn't require a reason, just opportunity." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. Made me who I am. And right now who I am is a guy eating excellent tacos with a beautiful woman who's getting hot sauce on her very expensive sweater." Isabel looked down to see a red stain spreading across the cashmere. Instead of horror, she felt something close to delight. "It's just a sweater. Just a sweater that probably costs more than my rent. Then I guess I better enjoy ruining it." Liam laughed, the sound rich and genuine. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect? Ice Queen, boardroom barracuda, someone who'd show up in a limo and complain about the lack of proper silverware. And instead, you got someone who can't eat a taco without destroying her clothes. Instead, I got someone real." The word hung between them, loaded with meaning. Real. When was the last time anyone had called Isabel Hartley real? She was powerful, successful, intimidating, brilliant, but real. That felt like something she'd lost in the accident, buried under layers of corporate armor and defensive walls. "Your turn," Liam said, signaling Estrella for 2 bottles of Mexican Coke. "Why did you ask me to dinner?" "Because you saved me from the most humiliating night of my life. That's gratitude, not a reason for a date." "This is a date." Liam's cheeks flushed slightly. "I mean, I thought, unless you make a habit of eating street food with random mechanics." "First time for that, too." Isabel accepted the bottle, noting how Liam's fingers were stained despite obvious scrubbing. Working hands. Honest hands. And to answer your question, I asked you to dinner because you're the first person in 5 years who's looked at me and seen something other than my wheelchair or my bank account. What do I see? The question was quiet, serious, and Isabel found herself holding her breath as she waited for his answer. Someone who's stronger than she knows and lonelier than she admits. The words hit like an arrow finding its target. Isabel blinked back sudden tears, overwhelmed by the accuracy of his observation. "Sorry," Liam said quickly. "Too much." "No, no one's ever seen that before." Maybe they weren't looking hard enough. As the evening deepened, their conversation flowed like wine, easy, intoxicating, and surprisingly intimate. Liam told her about his garage, how he'd started with nothing but a loan from a teacher who believed in him and built it into something that employed 6 people and specialized in high-end foreign cars. Isabel found herself talking about the accident, the board meetings, the constant pressure to prove she was strong enough to lead despite her disability. "The worst part," she said, surprising herself with her honesty, "isn't the physical limitations. It's the way people look at me now. Like I'm broken glass that might cut them if they get too close." "You're not broken," Liam said simply. "How can you be so sure? You barely know me." "Because broken things don't build billion-dollar companies. They don't face down rooms full of hostile shareholders. And they definitely don't have the courage to eat tacos in the street after spending their whole lives in 5-star restaurants." Estrella appeared beside their table with a plate of churros dusted in cinnamon sugar. "On the house," she announced, "for the brave girl trying new things." As they shared dessert, Isabel found herself studying Liam's face in the glow of the string lights overhead. There was something magnetic about him, not the polished charm of the men in her social circle, but something deeper. A kind of grounded strength that came from surviving life's storms rather than avoiding them. "Can I ask you something potentially offensive?" she said. "Now I'm curious. Last night when you walked into that restaurant, you had to know you didn't belong there. Weren't you intimidated?" Liam considered this, absently turning his Coke bottle in circles on the plastic table. "Intimidated by what? Fancy plates and overpriced wine?" "That's just stuff, Isabel. It's not real power." "What is real power then?" "Being able to look someone in the eye and know you've never compromised who you are for what you wanted." He met her gaze. "Like you did last night. You could have laughed along with that asshole, played the game, protected your image. But you didn't." "I was humiliated." "You were authentic. That's rare in any world, but especially yours." As they finished their churros, the October evening grew cooler, and Isabel pulled her jacket tighter around her shoulders. The street began to empty as food trucks started closing down their owners, counting the day's earnings and preparing for tomorrow. "I should probably get going," Isabel said reluctantly. "Early board meeting tomorrow." "Of course, let me call you a car." "Actually," she found herself saying, "would you mind walking with me for a while? I mean, if you're not busy." "Walking, rolling, whatever. I'm not ready for this to end yet." Liam's smile was soft understanding. "I'd like that." They made their way through the winding streets of the Lower East Side, past late-night bodegas and apartment buildings where families gathered on fire escapes to escape the heat of small rooms. This was a New York Isabel rarely saw, working-class, diverse, alive with the kind of energy that came from people building lives rather than managing fortunes. "It's beautiful," she said, as they passed a community garden where someone had strung lights through the trees. "Not exactly Fifth Avenue." "No, it's better. It's real." They paused at a small playground where a few teenagers were shooting basketball under floodlights, their laughter echoing off the surrounding buildings. Isabel watched them play, remembering what it felt like to move without thinking, to run without planning each step. "Do you miss it?" Liam asked quietly. "Running, I mean." And it was a question most people were afraid to ask, but somehow, coming from him, it didn't hurt. "Every day," she admitted. "But not in the way people think. I don't miss the physical act as much as I miss the freedom. The ability to go anywhere, do anything without planning and preparation and worrying about accessibility. What would you do if you could run again for just one day?" Isabel smiled, the question stirring dreams she'd buried 5 years ago. "Dance. I used to love dancing. Ballet, actually, when I was younger. My father thought it was frivolous, but my mother enrolled me in secret." She laughed softly. "I wasn't very good, but I loved the feeling of flying. You could still dance. In a wheelchair. Why not? Movement is movement. Grace is grace." The simplicity of his perspective took her breath away. In his world, limitations were just puzzles to solve, not permanent barriers. They continued walking, rolling through the neighborhood, past a late-night bookstore with a cat sleeping in the window, and a small cafe where elderly men played chess under lamplight. Each block revealed new layers of life Isabel had never noticed from the back of her town car. "Liam," she said, as they approached the main street where she could catch a taxi. "Can I ask you something that might sound crazy? Crazier than a billionaire CEO eating food truck tacos. What are you doing Saturday afternoon? Working, probably. Why? There's this charity gala my company sponsors every year. It's for spinal cord research, not exactly a fun party, but the cause matters to me personally." She hesitated, suddenly aware of how this might sound. "Would you maybe want to come with me as my date?" Liam stopped walking, his expression unreadable. "A charity gala. I know it's not your scene." "Isabel, I don't own a tuxedo. I've never been to a gala. I don't know which fork to use or how to make small talk with senators and CEOs. I don't care about any of that. Your father will. My father doesn't get a vote in who I spend my time with. Doesn't he?" The question hung between them, heavy with implications. They both knew the truth that her world and his were separated by more than money, by expectations, obligations, and the kind of social pressures that could crush even the strongest connection. "He wants to control my life," Isabel said finally. "But he can't control my heart." Liam's eyes searched her face in the streetlight, looking for something she wasn't sure she could give him. Certainty, maybe. A guarantee that this wasn't just rebellion or charity or some rich girl's fantasy about slumming with the help. "Okay," he said quietly. "Okay. I'll go with you. But I'm renting the tux, and if I embarrass you, you can't say I didn't warn you. You could never embarrass me." Famous last words. As they stood on this corner waiting for a taxi, Isabel felt something shift between them. What had started as curiosity was becoming something deeper, more dangerous. She was falling for this man, this mechanic who saw her as more than her limitations, who challenged her assumptions about what mattered and what didn't. "Liam, yeah, thank you. For tonight. For treating me like what? Like a woman instead of a project." A taxi pulled up, its yellow bulk cutting through the night out like a lifeline back to her world. But as Liam helped her into the back seat, Isabel found herself already counting the hours until Saturday when she could see him again. "Good night, Isabel." "Good night." As the taxi pulled away, she watched him in the back window until he disappeared into the shadows of the Lower East Side. Her phone buzzed with messages her father, her assistant board members who'd heard about her slumming expedition, but she ignored them all. Instead, she pressed her face to the window and watched the city flow past, seeing it differently now. not as a kingdom to conquer, but as a tapestry of lives and stories and possibilities she'd never considered. When she finally arrived at the Fifth Avenue penthouse, Rosa was waiting with her evening medications and a knowing smile. "Good dinner, mija." "The best, oh," Isabel said, and meant it. As she prepared for bed, she caught sight of herself in the mirror again. The hot sauce stain on her sweater had set marking her expensive clothes, with evidence of her evening's adventure. Tomorrow she would face her father's disapproval and the board's whispered concerns. She would navigate the treacherous waters of corporate politics and shareholder expectations. But tonight, she had eaten tacos with a man who saw her as whole, who challenged her to be brave, who made her remember what it felt like to hope for something beyond quarterly earnings and stock prices. Tonight, Isabel Hartley was falling in love. 3 days later, as Saturday evening approached, she stood in her closet, again facing a different kind of challenge. This time she wasn't choosing clothes for a stranger, she was choosing them for a man who'd already seen past her armor to the woman underneath. The gala dress she selected was midnight blue, elegant, but not ostentatious, with a neckline that suggested confidence without demanding attention. As she fastened her grandmother's diamond necklace, a piece that had witnessed 3 generations of Hartley women navigate the complexities of love and duty, Isabel wondered if she was making the biggest mistake of her life, or the best decision she'd ever made. Outside October, rain began to fall against her windows, each drop carrying the promise of a night that would change everything. In 2 hours, Liam Walker would walk into her world, and nothing would ever be quite the same again. The rain had stopped by the time Liam's borrowed Honda Civic pulled up to the Plaza Hotel, but the October evening still carried the sharp bite of autumn. He sat in the driver's seat for a full minute, staring up at the towering facade of one of Manhattan's most iconic buildings, its windows glowing like a constellation against the darkening sky. The tuxedo felt foreign against his skin, perfectly tailored, thanks to Isabel's insistence on sending a stylist to his garage, but still somehow wrong, like wearing someone else's life. He'd spent the afternoon practicing bow tie knots and researching charity gala etiquette on YouTube, feeling increasingly like a fraud, preparing for the performance of a lifetime. His phone buzzed with a text from Isabel. "Valet will take your car. Ask for James. I've arranged everything. You've got this." She'd thought of everything, even down to ensuring he wouldn't have to navigate the subtle humiliations that came with driving a 15-year-old Honda to an event where most guests arrived in cars worth more than his annual income. The kindness of it made his chest tight. Inside the plaza's opulent lobby, crystal chandeliers cast rainbows across marble floors that reflected the evening's guests like a living mirror. Women glided past in gowns that cost more than most people's rent, their jewelry catching the light as they moved with the practiced grace of those born to such spaces. Men in perfectly cut tuxedos discussed stock portfolios and political connections with the casual ease of people who'd never worried about paying for groceries. Liam had never felt more out of place in his life. "Sir?" A young woman in an elegant black dress approached with a tablet. "Name for check-in." "Liam Walker. I'm with Isabel Hartley." And the woman's eyebrows rose slightly, the first crack in her professional composure. She tapped her screen, then smiled with renewed warmth. "Of course, Mr. Walker. Ms. Hartley is waiting for you in the terrace room. Right this way." As they walked through corridors lined with oil paintings and fresh orchids, Liam caught fragments of conversation from the early arrivals. "Did you see the Times article about the biotech merger? Hartley's bringing a date tonight. Some nobody she picked up last week. I heard he's a mechanic. Can you imagine? Daddy says it's just rebellion. She'll come to her senses." Each whispered comment felt like a small blade, but Liam kept his spine straight and his expression neutral. He'd survived worse than rich people's gossip. The terrace room took his breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Central Park, where the last rays of sunlight painted the autumn foliage in shades of gold and crimson. Round tables draped in ivory silk filled the space, each centerpiece a masterpiece of white roses and cascading greenery. A string quartet played something classical and beautiful in one corner, while waiters moved through the crowd with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres that looked more like art than food. And there, near the windows, stood Isabel. She wore midnight blue silk that seemed to absorb and reflect the light simultaneously, the fabric flowing around her wheelchair like water. Her hair was swept up in an elegant chignon that showcased the graceful line of her neck and the vintage diamond necklace that caught the light with every breath. But it was her smile, radiant, genuine, and directed entirely at him, that made everything else fade into background noise. "You came," she said, as he approached, and there was something vulnerable in her voice that made his chest tighten. "Did you think I wouldn't? I thought you might change your mind. Decide this was all too much." Liam looked around the room, taking in the obvious wealth and power on display, then back at her face. "Too much what beauty, intelligence, a woman who challenges me to be better than I thought I could be. Too much complication. Isabel." He moved closer, close enough to catch the subtle scent of her perfume. Something expensive, but not overwhelming, like blooming jasmine on a summer night. "I've rebuilt engines from the ground up. Complication doesn't scare me." Her smile could have powered the entire hotel. "In that case, are you ready to meet some people who will definitely try to scare you?" Before he could answer, a voice cut through the ambient conversation like a blade. "Isabel, darling, you look absolutely radiant tonight." The woman approaching them was perhaps 60, with silver hair swept into a perfect chignon and the kind of bone structure that suggested generations of careful breeding. Her black gown was simple but clearly couture, and the pearls at her throat probably cost more than Liam's garage. "Mrs. Vanderbilt," Isabel replied, her tone carefully neutral. "How lovely to see you. May I introduce Liam Walker?" "Liam, this is Catherine Vanderbilt, one of our foundation's most generous supporters." Catherine's eyes swept over Liam with the practiced assessment of someone accustomed to cataloging people's worth at first glance. Her smile never wavered, but something cold flickered behind her eyes. "Mr. Walker, how interesting. And what is it that you do?" "I'm a mechanic," Liam replied, simply offering his hand. Catherine's handshake lasted exactly 1 second, long enough to be polite, short enough to convey dismissal. "How fascinating. I don't think I've ever met a mechanic at one of these events." "First time for everything," Liam said easily. "Indeed." Catherine turned back to Isabel. "Your father mentioned you were bringing someone new tonight. He didn't mention the occupation." "My father tends to focus on different details than I do," Isabel replied, steel creeping into her voice. Of course. Well, I must say it's refreshing to see you branching out, dear. Though I do hope you'll save a dance for Senator Morrison's son. He's been asking about you all evening." As Catherine glided away, Liam felt Isabel's tension like heat radiating from her skin. "Friend of yours?" he asked. "Old family friend, which in our world means someone who smiles to your face while calculating how to use your weaknesses against you." "And bringing me here is a weakness?" Isabel turned to face him fully, her green eyes fierce. "Bringing you here is the bravest thing I've done in 5 years." Before Liam could respond, another interruption arrived in the form of a tall, distinguished man with silver hair and the kind of commanding presence that made conversations pause when he entered a room. "Isabel," William Hartley's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to immediate obedience. his steel-gray eyes so like his daughter's fixed on Liam with undisguised calculation. "I see you've brought your friend. Father, I'd like you to meet Liam Walker. Liam, my father, William Hartley." William extended his hand, and Liam found himself in a handshake that was clearly a test of strength. The older man's grip was firm, practiced, designed to dominate. Liam met it with quiet confidence, neither backing down nor escalating. "Mr. Walker, Isabel tells me you work with your hands." "I do. Honest work, I'm sure, though I imagine quite different from the challenges Isabel faces in running a global corporation." The dismissal was polite but unmistakable. Liam felt Isabel tense beside him, ready to defend him, but he caught her eye with a slight shake of his head. "Very different," Liam agreed. "When I fix something, it either works or it doesn't. No gray areas, no politics. Just the truth of whether the engine runs." "How refreshingly simple. Unfortunately, business requires a more nuanced approach." "I imagine it does. Must be challenging to navigate all those nuances while still sleeping at night." The words were mild, conversational, but their implication was crystal clear. William's eyes sharpened, recognizing the intelligence behind Liam's working-class exterior. "Gentlemen," Isabel intervened smoothly. "Perhaps we should find our table. I believe dinner is about to be served." As William moved away to greet other guests, Liam felt like he'd just survived his first major test of the evening. But judging by the looks he was getting from various corners of the room, it wouldn't be his last. Their table was strategically positioned close enough to the front to demonstrate Isabel's importance, but far enough from the head table to avoid the most intense scrutiny. Their dinner companions included Dr. Sarah Chen, a renowned spinal cord researcher, Marcus Reed, a tech entrepreneur whose company had gone public the previous year, his wife Jennifer, who ran an art gallery in Soho, and Robert Morrison, the senator's son Catherine had mentioned earlier. Robert was everything Central Casting would order for the role of political scion, tall, handsome in a bland way, with perfectly styled blonde hair, and the kind of smile that had been focus grouped for maximum appeal. He'd positioned himself next to Isabel and spent the cocktail hour regaling her with stories of his latest humanitarian mission to somewhere appropriately photogenic. "The children in Cambodia were absolutely inspiring," Robert was saying as they took their seats. "Despite having so little, they maintained such hope. It really puts our problems in perspective, doesn't it?" "Absolutely," Isabel replied with the kind of polite enthusiasm that didn't reach her eyes. "Though I imagine infrastructure challenges made medical care delivery quite complex." "Oh, we had excellent local support. My father's connections opened doors that might otherwise have remained closed." Liam watched the exchange with growing fascination. This was Isabel in her natural habitat, navigating conversations that were part genuine interest, part social obligation, part political theater. She was magnificent at it, but he could see the effort it required, the constant calculation behind every response. "And you, Mr. Walker," Robert said, turning his attention to Liam with the kind of smile predators used before attacking. "What brings you to our little gathering?" "Isabel invited me." "Of course, but I mean, what's your connection to spinal cord research, professional interest, personal experience?" The question was designed to corner him, to force him to admit he didn't belong or reveal some tragic backstory that would explain his presence. Liam took a sip of wine before answering. "I believe in supporting causes that matter to people I care about." How wonderfully simple. Though I have to say the complexity of medical research funding can be quite overwhelming for those without experience in the field. "I imagine it's not unlike engine diagnostics," Liam replied evenly. "You start with symptoms, trace them back to root causes, then figure out the most effective intervention. Whether you're dealing with a misfiring cylinder or a damaged neural pathway, the principles are similar." Dr. Chen, who had been listening with growing interest, leaned forward. That's actually a remarkably apt analogy. We do approach spinal cord injury much like a complex systems failure, identifying the specific points of breakdown and developing targeted repair strategies. Exactly, Liam said, warming to the subject. Though I imagine your diagnostic tools are considerably more sophisticated than a code reader. You'd be surprised, so some of our most advanced imaging techniques work on principles that aren't entirely different from automotive diagnostics. Robert's smile had become strained as the conversation moved away from his control. Well, this is certainly an interesting perspective, though I think we might be oversimplifying the medical field somewhat. Are we? Dr. Chen asked, her tone sharpening. Because in my experience, the best innovations often come from cross-disciplinary thinking, fresh perspectives on old problems. As the conversation continued, Liam found himself genuinely engaged with Dr. Chen's research, asking questions that revealed both his intelligence and his ability to grasp complex concepts quickly. He wasn't trying to prove anything, he was simply curious, and his curiosity was infectious. Isabel watched it all with growing amazement. This was exactly what she'd hoped for, but hadn't quite dared to believe would happen. Liam wasn't intimidated by the intellectual firepower around the table. He was energized by it. He asked thoughtful questions, offered insights from his own field, and treated everyone with the same respectful attention, regardless of their social status. The mechanical principles behind spinal cord stimulation devices are fascinating, he was saying to Dr. Chen. I'd love to understand more about how you optimize the electrical interfaces. You should visit our lab sometime, Dr. Chen replied enthusiastically. We're always looking for people who understand complex mechanical systems. Some of our biggest breakthroughs have come from engineers who approach the problems differently than traditional medical researchers. Robert's expression had moved beyond strained into barely concealed hostility. I'm sure Mr. Walker's mechanical insights are valuable, though I wonder if we might be getting a bit too technical for our dinner companions. Jennifer Reed, who had been following the conversation with obvious interest, laughed. Speak for yourself, Robert. This is the most fascinating dinner conversation I've had all year. As the evening progressed through multiple courses of artfully arranged food, Liam found himself relaxing despite the undercurrents of tension. The alcohol helped excellent wine that went down like liquid velvet. But more than that, he was beginning to understand the rhythms of this world. It wasn't so different from any other social group, really. There were dominance games, alliance building, and subtle competitions for status. The stakes were higher, and the weapons more refined, but the basic human dynamics were recognizable. The real revelation was watching Isabel navigate it all. She was brilliant at reading people, knowing exactly when to deploy charm, when to show steel, when to deflect with humor. She managed to make everyone at the table feel heard while advancing her own agenda with surgical precision. It was like watching a master chess player work through a complex endgame. When the speeches began, the Foundation's president discussing advances in spinal cord research, a patient sharing her recovery story, a researcher outlining promising new treatments, Liam found himself genuinely moved. This wasn't just social theater. It was real work being done to help real people. The money being raised tonight would fund research that could change lives. Ladies and gentlemen, the Foundation president announced as dessert was being served. I'm delighted to announce that this year's gala has raised over $3 million for spinal cord research. The applause was enthusiastic, genuine. Around the room, Liam could see the satisfaction on faces that had written substantial checks to make this possible. Whatever else these people were, they were also genuinely committed to this cause. Of course, the president continued, none of this would be possible without the continued support of our founding sponsor, Hartley Biotech, and the visionary leadership of our board chair, Isabel Hartley. More applause as a spotlight found their table. Isabel smiled graciously, raising her hand in acknowledgement, but Liam could see the slight tension in her shoulders. Being the center of attention in her wheelchair always carried an extra layer of complexity. She was simultaneously celebrated for her achievements and defined by her limitations. "Ms. Hartley," the president continued, "would you like to say a few words?" It wasn't really a request. Isabel moved to the small stage with the fluid efficiency she'd perfected over 5 years of navigating the world from a wheelchair. The microphone was adjusted for her height, and she waited for the room to settle into attentive silence. 5 years ago, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the sound system. "I learned firsthand how quickly life can change. One moment you're planning your future, and the next you're rebuilding it from the ground up." Liam felt the collective intake of breath around the room. Isabel rarely spoke publicly about her accident, and her willingness to be vulnerable in this setting was clearly unexpected. "But what I've learned in these 5 years is that healing isn't just about medical intervention. It's about hope. It's about believing that tomorrow can be better than today, that science and compassion can work together to solve problems that once seemed impossible." Her eyes found Liam in the crowd, and he felt the connection like an electric current. "Most importantly, I've learned that strength doesn't come from avoiding difficulty. It comes from facing it with people who see our potential rather than our limitations, who challenge us to be better than we thought we could be." The applause that followed was different from the polite appreciation that had greeted previous speakers. This was personal, emotional recognition of courage that went beyond writing checks. As Isabel returned to their table, Robert leaned over, with what was clearly meant to be a supportive comment. "Beautifully said, Isabel. Very brave of you to be so open about your struggles." "They're not struggles," Liam said quietly, his voice carrying just far enough to reach their immediate neighbors. "They're triumphs." The simple correction hung in the air, and Liam saw something shift in Isabel's expression, a recognition that here was someone who truly understood the difference between pity and admiration. "Quite right," Dr. Chen said approvingly. "Resilience is an achievement, not a consolation prize." As the formal program concluded and guests began moving to the adjoining ballroom for dancing, Robert made his move. "Isabel, you simply must save me a dance. I've been looking forward to it all evening." The assumption that she would dance with him, or could dance at all, revealed everything about how Robert saw her. As a project to be managed, a problem to be solved with appropriate political solutions. "Actually," Liam said, standing and extending his hand to Isabel, "I believe this dance is mine." The boldness of it sent a ripple of surprise through their immediate area. Robert's face flushed, whether from anger or embarrassment, Liam couldn't tell. "I'm not sure you understand," Robert said with a condescending smile. "Isabel's condition makes traditional dancing somewhat complicated." "The only thing that's complicated," Isabel said, taking Liam's hand, "is choosing between standing up to dance or rolling over someone who can't recognize grace when he sees it." As they moved toward the ballroom, Liam could feel dozens of eyes following them. The string quartet had been replaced by a small jazz ensemble, their music intimate and sophisticated. Most of the dancing couples were engaging in polite, practiced movements, the kind of formal choreography taught in cotillion classes and refined at countless similar events. "You know I can't actually dance right," Isabel said, as they reached the edge of the dance floor. "Says who? Physics, biology, the basic mechanics of traditional ballroom dancing. Good thing I don't know anything about traditional ballroom dancing." Liam positioned himself in front of her wheelchair, taking her hands in his. "Movement is movement. Grace is grace. Remember, The music was The Way You Look Tonight, played with the kind of understated elegance that made even familiar songs seem new. Liam began to move not in the formal patterns of traditional ballroom dance, but in something more organic, more personal. He swayed with the rhythm guiding Isabel's upper body to move with him, creating a kind of dance that belonged entirely to them. Around them, other couples gradually stopped their own dancing to watch. This wasn't pity or curiosity, it was recognition of something beautiful happening in real time. Isabel's movements were fluid, graceful, responding to Liam's lead in ways that transcended the limitations of her wheelchair. "How does this work?" she whispered, mesmerized by the sensation of moving to music again. "You feel the rhythm. I feel you feeling it. We move together." Her eyes were bright with unshed tears, but her smile was radiant. For the first time in 5 years, Isabel Hartley was dancing, and it was everything she remembered and more. From the edge of the dance floor, William Hartley watched his daughter with an expression of such complex emotion that it was impossible to read. Beside him, Dr. Chen wiped tears from her eyes. "Beautiful," she murmured. "Disgusting," Robert Morrison muttered to anyone who would listen. Making a spectacle of herself for some blue-collar nobody. But his words were lost in the general murmur of appreciation from the crowd. What they were witnessing wasn't a spectacle, it was a love story unfolding in real time, set to music, and illuminated by the kind of courage that made impossible things seem inevitable. As the song wound to its close, Liam spun Isabel's chair in a gentle pirouette that made her laugh with pure joy. The applause that followed was spontaneous, heartfelt, and tinged with the recognition that they'd all just witnessed something extraordinary. "That," Isabel said, slightly breathless, "was the most beautiful 3 minutes of my life." "Just the beginning," Liam replied, lifting her hand to kiss her knuckles with old-fashioned gallantry. The gesture was sweet, romantic, and unfortunately perfectly timed to be captured by the society photographer who'd been documenting the evening's events. The flash went off just as Liam's lips touched Isabel's skin, freezing the moment in time. By tomorrow, that photograph would be in every society page and gossip blog in the city. The caption would read something like, "Biotech heiress and her mysterious mechanic share intimate moment." And the speculation would begin in earnest. But for now, in this moment, none of that mattered. What mattered was the way Isabel looked at Liam as if he'd just given her the world, and the way he looked back as if she was worth everything he'd ever worked for. "Would you like to get some air?" she asked. "The terrace is beautiful at night." They made their way through the crowd, accepting congratulations and deflecting questions with practiced ease. The terrace overlooked Central Park, where the autumn trees stood like dark sentinels against the star-filled sky. The city spread out below them, millions of lights twinkling like earthbound constellations. "It's beautiful," Liam said, leaning against the stone balustrade. "I used to come out here when I was little," Isabel said, positioning her wheelchair beside him. "My mother would bring me to these events, and when the grown-up conversation got boring, we'd sneak out here to count stars." "Your mother sounds like she was wonderful." "She was. She died when I was 16. Cancer." "I'm sorry." "She would have liked you. She had a gift for seeing through people's facades to who they really were underneath." "What do you think she would have seen in me?" Isabel considered the question seriously, studying his profile in the soft light from the ballroom. "Strength without arrogance, intelligence without pretension, and kindness that comes from understanding pain rather than avoiding it. That's a pretty generous assessment." "My mother didn't believe in false generosity. She believed in truth." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the city breathe below them. Somewhere in the distance, sirens wailed ambulances or police cars responding to someone's emergency. It was a reminder that beyond the bubble of wealth and privilege, real life continued with all its complexities and struggles. "Liam," Isabel said quietly, "what happened tonight? The dancing, the way you handled everyone, it was perfect. But I need you to understand what you're getting into." "What do you mean?" "This world doesn't forgive easily. The photograph, the gossip, the speculation, it's going to get intense. People will dig into your background, your finances, your family history. They'll look for reasons to dismiss you or ways to use you. Let them look. It's not that simple. My father will try to drive you away. The board will question my judgment. Shareholders will worry about my personal life affecting business decisions." Liam turned to face her fully, his storm-gray eyes serious in the moonlight. "Isabel, are you trying to talk me out of this?" "I'm trying to be honest about what this means. Dating me isn't just dating me. It's signing up for a level of scrutiny and pressure that most people can't handle. Most people aren't me. No, they're not. But even you might decide it's not worth it when the real pressure starts." Liam was quiet for a long moment, considering her words. She was right, of course. Tonight had been just the beginning, a relatively friendly introduction to her world. The real challenges would come later when the novelty wore off and the serious opposition began. "Can I tell you something?" he said finally. "Of course. I've spent my whole life being underestimated. Foster kid, high school dropout guy who works with his hands instead of his brain. People look at me and see limitations just like they look at you and see limitations. It's not the same thing. Isn't it? The specifics are different, but the core is the same: other people deciding what we're capable of based on their own narrow definitions of worth." Isabel felt something shift in her chest, a recognition of truth that went deeper than logic. "The difference is," Liam continued, "I've never had anything worth fighting for before. Not really. My business, my apartment, my independence, those are all fine, but they're just things. They're not worth enduring a war. And this is, oh, you are." The simple statement hung between them like a promise. Not dramatic or flowery, just honest truth delivered with the quiet certainty that had first attracted her to him. "Even if it costs you everything you've built, everything I've built brought me to this moment with you. If I have to choose between my comfortable small life and a complicated big one with you, that's not really a choice at all." Inside the ballroom, the jazz ensemble launched into "At Last," the melody drifting through the open doors like a musical benediction. Without discussion, they began moving again, Liam swaying with the music, Isabel responding with the fluid grace that came naturally when she stopped thinking about limitations and started thinking about possibilities. "We're really doing this," she said, and it wasn't a question. "We're really doing this." As they danced on the terrace under the stars, neither of them noticed the figure watching from the shadows near the door. William Hartley had come looking for his daughter, but what he found was something that challenged every assumption he'd made about her future and his ability to control it. The man dancing with Isabel wasn't a gold digger or a social climber. He was something far more dangerous. Someone who genuinely loved her, who saw her as complete rather than broken, who would fight for her happiness, even if it meant fighting William himself. For the first time in his carefully orchestrated life, William Hartley realized he might be facing an opponent he couldn't buy, intimidate, or manipulate. The thought should have filled him with rage or determination to crush this threat to his plans. Instead, watching his daughter laugh with pure joy for the first time since her accident, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years: uncertainty about whether winning this particular battle would be worth what it might cost them both. The music swelled around the dancing couple, carrying their hopes and fears into the night sky, where stars bore witness to love stories that defied every odd. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, fresh opposition, and the kind of pressure that could break even the strongest bonds. But tonight, on a terrace overlooking the city that never slept, a mechanic and a billionaire CEO danced to jazz music and planned a future that belonged entirely to them. The photograph appeared on page 6 of the New York Post the following Monday morning, with a headline that made Isabel's coffee turn bitter in her mouth. Wheels of Fortune billionaire CEO's mystery mechanic sweeps her off her feet. The image captured the exact moment Liam had kissed her hand on the dance floor, her face radiant with joy, his expression tender and protective. By noon, the story had been picked up by every major gossip blog and society publication. The narrative was irresistible, a modern Cinderella story with the genders reversed, complete with class warfare and corporate intrigue. Isabel's assistant fielded 47 interview requests before lunch, while Liam discovered that 3 reporters had shown up at his garage, attempting to interview his employees about their boss's secret romance. "This is exactly what I was afraid of," Isabel said into her phone as she reviewed the morning's coverage from her corner office on the 42nd floor of the Hartley building. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Manhattan spread below her like a chessboard, where she'd spent years learning to play by rules that suddenly seemed irrelevant. "Are you having second thoughts?" Liam's voice came through clear, despite the ambient noise of his garage in the background. "About us never. About exposing you to this circus every minute." "Hey," his tone gentled. "I knew what I was signing up for. Besides, some of the coverage isn't terrible. The Times piece was actually pretty respectful." Isabel scrolled to the article he mentioned. The Times had indeed treated their relationship with dignity, focusing on the charity gala's success and mentioning Liam only as her companion, without the sensationalism of the tabloids. But buried in the business section was another story that made her stomach clench. Hartley Biotech shareholders question leadership stability amid personal controversies. "Liam, I need to tell you something. The board is calling an emergency meeting for Thursday." The silence on the other end of the line stretched long enough that she wondered if the call had dropped. "About us?" he finally asked. "About me, my judgment, my ability to lead the company through the Bayer-Kern merger without distractions." "Am I a distraction?" The question was asked lightly, but Isabel could hear the hurt underneath. "You're the best thing that's happened to me in 5 years, but to them you're evidence that I'm not thinking clearly." "What are you going to do?" "What I always do, fight." But even as she said it, Isabel felt the weight of the battle ahead. The Bayer-Kern merger was worth $8 billion and would position Hartley Biotech as a global leader in pharmaceutical research. 3 years of negotiations had led to this moment, and the vote was scheduled for the following month. If the board lost confidence in her leadership, and now everything could unravel. Her father appeared in her doorway without knocking, a privilege of ownership that he exercised whenever he wanted to remind her that despite her title as CEO, ultimate power still rested with him. "We need to talk," William said, closing the door behind him with deliberate precision. "Liam, I'll call you back," Isabel said into the phone. "Everything okay?" "It will be." As she hung up, William settled into the chair across from her desk, the same chair where he'd conducted countless negotiations, delivered ultimatums, and shaped the direction of an empire that employed 30,000 people across 4 continents. "You're going to end it," he said without preamble. "Good morning to you too, Father." "This isn't a joke, Isabel. I've spent the morning on calls with board members, major shareholders, and our legal team. The consensus is unanimous. Your personal life has become a liability. My personal life is my own business. Your personal life affects stock prices, merger negotiations, and investor confidence. 3 board members have already expressed concerns about your judgment. Robert Morrison's father called to say the family is reconsidering their support for the merger. Isabel felt a chill that had nothing to do with her office's aggressive air conditioning. Senator Morrison's political connections were crucial to navigating the regulatory approvals needed for the Bayer-Kern deal. Because I chose to dance with someone who makes me happy instead of his arrogant son. Because you chose to make a public spectacle with a man who has no understanding of the forces at play in your life. William leaned forward, his voice taking on the persuasive tone that had closed billion-dollar deals. I've had him investigated, Isabel. Your mechanic. His name is Liam. Liam Walker, age 31, owner of Walker Automotive Services. Annual revenue approximately $400,000, personal assets under $50,000, no college education, former foster child with a juvenile record for theft. Each fact was delivered like a calculated blow designed to strip away the romantic narrative and reduce Liam to data points that spelled failure in William's world. He was 16 and stealing food, Isabel said quietly. I read the same report you did. You had him investigated too. I had him protected. I know you, Father. I know how you operate when someone threatens your plans. William's expression shifted, recognizing that his daughter had outmaneuvered him tactically while still losing strategically. Then you understand the situation. This man cannot be part of your life if you want to remain CEO of this company. Is that a threat? It's a reality. The board meeting Thursday will address leadership stability. If you continue this relationship, I cannot guarantee your position. For a moment, father and daughter stared at each other across the polished mahogany that separated them. 30 years of shared history hung in the air, birthday parties and bedtime stories, business lessons and family dinners. The gradual transformation of love into a power struggle that neither seemed able to win. You built this company for me, Isabel said finally. Everything you did, every sacrifice you made was so I could inherit something worth having. Exactly. And I won't watch you throw it away for infatuation. What if it's not infatuation? What if it's love? William's laugh was bitter. Love is a luxury you can't afford. You think I loved every decision I made building this empire. You think I married your mother because my heart told me to. The words hit like a slap, revealing a cynicism that Isabel had suspected but never heard articulated so starkly. Mother would be ashamed of what you've become, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Your mother understood sacrifice. She knew that personal happiness was secondary to family legacy. My mother was dying when she told me to find someone who loved me for who I was, not what I represented. She made me promise to choose happiness over duty if I ever had to choose. William's composure cracked for the first time in the conversation. She was medicated, emotional. She didn't understand the implications. She understood everything. Isabel's voice grew stronger. She understood that you'd spent so many years building this company that you'd forgotten why it mattered. She understood that power without love is just elaborate loneliness. Isabel, no. She moved her wheelchair around the desk, positioning herself directly in front of him. You want to know what I'm going to tell the board on Thursday? I'm going to tell them that my personal life has made me a better leader, not a worse one. That loving someone who sees past my limitations has reminded me why we do this work in the first place. And when they vote you out, then I'll build something new, something that matters more than stock prices and merger deals. William stood straightening his jacket, with the precision of a man reassembling his armor. You're making the biggest mistake of your life. No, father. The biggest mistake of my life would be becoming so afraid of losing power that I forgot what it feels like to be human. As William left her office, closing the door with finality that felt like an ending, Isabel realized she was shaking. Not from fear, but from the adrenaline of finally speaking truths that had been building for years. Her phone buzzed with a text from Liam. Lunch I'm buying. Food truck, obviously. Despite everything, she smiled. In a world of power plays and calculated moves, he remained refreshingly direct. She texted back, can't. Crisis management mode. Rain check. Everything okay? She stared at the screen, considering how to answer. Everything was falling apart in the most spectacularly public way possible. Her father was threatening her career. The board was questioning her competence, and the media was treating her love life like entertainment. But somehow, she felt more alive than she had in years. Better than okay. Complicated, but better. That afternoon, Isabel threw herself into preparation for the board meeting with the intensity that had built her reputation as one of the most formidable executives in biotech. She reviewed 5 years of financial data, compiled evidence of successful strategic decisions, and prepared responses to every possible challenge to her leadership. But her concentration kept being broken by phone calls from people whose opinions had never mattered to her before. Society reporters wanting quotes about her fairy tale romance. Former classmates suddenly interested in reconnecting. Business acquaintances fishing for inside information about the merger's stability. The most surprising call came at 4 o'clock from Dr. Sarah Chen. Isabel, I hope you don't mind me calling directly. I got your number from the Foundation database. Of course not, Sarah. What can I do for you? I wanted you to know that several of us from Saturday night have been discussing the board situation. We think what's happening is unconscionable. Isabel felt a spark of hope. What do you mean? Your personal life has no bearing on your professional competence. You've led Hartley Biotech to record profits and breakthrough research. The idea that dating someone outside your social circle somehow disqualifies you from leadership is medieval. I appreciate the support, but it's not just support, it's action. I'm organizing a letter from the medical research community expressing confidence in your leadership. Dr. Elizabeth Warren from Harvard is coordinating something similar from the business school faculty. We won't let them destroy your career because you chose love over politics. The kindness of it made Isabel's throat tight with emotion. These were people she barely knew rallying to defend her right to make personal choices without professional consequences. Sarah, I don't know what to say. Say you'll fight. Say you won't let them intimidate you into giving up the best thing that's happened to you in years. That evening, Isabel arrived at Liam's garage to find him working late on a vintage Porsche, its engine parts spread across a workbench like a mechanical puzzle. The space smelled of oil and metal industrial lighting, casting harsh shadows that somehow felt more honest than the soft ambiance of any restaurant where she'd had dinner that week. You came, he said, wiping his hands on a rag before approaching her. I needed to see you. To see this. She gestured around the garage. To remember what matters. Rough day. The worst. And somehow looking at you now, it doesn't seem so important anymore. Liam studied her face in the fluorescent light, reading the exhaustion and stress she couldn't quite hide. Tell me. So she did. She told him about her father's ultimatum, the board meeting, the investigation into his background, the media circus that was consuming both their lives. She told him about the letters of support from people she barely knew, and the political pressures from people whose approval she'd never needed before. "I'm sorry," she said when she finished. "I'm sorry for dragging you into this mess." "Hey." Liam moved closer, taking her hands in his oil-stained ones. "Nobody dragged me anywhere. I'm here because I want to be here. Even knowing what it might cost you. What's it going to cost me? Some reporters asking questions, gossip columnists making assumptions about my motives. I've survived worse than rich people's disapproval. What if I lose the company? Then you'll build something better. What if I lose everything? You'll still have me, and I'll still have you. Everything else is just negotiable." The simplicity of his perspective cut through weeks of anxiety like a blade. In his world, love was the foundation, and everything else was constructed around it. In her world, love was a luxury that could be sacrificed for more important considerations. "Liam, there's something else. Something I need you to understand before you make any final decisions about us." "I'm listening." "If I fight for us, if I refuse to end this relationship, I'm not just risking my career. I'm risking the merger that could fund research into treatments for spinal cord injuries. Treatments that could help thousands of people like me." The weight of it settled between them like a physical presence. This wasn't just about corporate politics or family dynamics. Real people with real injuries were depending on the research that this merger would fund. "How sure are you that the merger will fall through if we stay together?" "Not sure at all, but the risk is real. My father isn't bluffing about the political pressure, and the Morrisons have significant influence over regulatory approvals." Liam was quiet for a long time, processing the moral complexity of their situation. Finally, he spoke. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you think your mother would want you to sacrifice your happiness for a deal that might happen anyway?" "I don't know. She believed in helping people, but she also believed in fighting for love." "Then maybe the question isn't what she would want. Maybe it's what you believe is right." They talked until nearly midnight, exploring every angle of their impossible situation. The garage gradually emptied as Liam's employees finished their work and headed home, leaving them alone with the Porsche and the weight of decisions that would shape both their futures. "I need to ask you something," Isabel said as they prepared to leave. "If I asked you to disappear for a while just until the merger is finalized, would you do it?" "Is that what you're asking?" "I'm asking if you would, hypothetically." Liam looked at her for a long moment, his storm-gray eyes serious in the harsh light. "If you asked me to walk away to protect something that mattered to you, I'd do it. But I'd hate every minute of it, and I'd spend the whole time hoping you'd change your mind. And if I didn't change my mind, then I'd respect your choice and try to move on with my life." The honesty of it made her chest ache. He would sacrifice their relationship if she asked him to, but he wouldn't pretend it didn't matter. "What would you do in my position?" "I'd fight. But then I've never had to choose between love and saving lives." As they stood in the empty garage surrounded by the tools and machinery that represented Liam's life's work, Isabel felt the weight of Thursday's board meeting pressing down on her like gravity. In 3 days, she would have to choose between the company that had defined her identity and the man who had helped her remember who she was underneath all the corporate armor. "Whatever happens Thursday," she said, "I want you to know that meeting you has been the best thing that's happened to me since before the accident." "Thursday's not the end of anything," Liam replied. "It's just the next chapter." But as Isabel drove home through the late-night streets of Manhattan, she couldn't shake the feeling that everything she'd built over the past 5 years was about to change in ways she couldn't control or predict. The next morning brought news that made the decision even more complicated. A leaked memo from the Bayer-Kern negotiating team suggested that concerns about Hartley Biotech's leadership stability were indeed affecting merger discussions. The German pharmaceutical giant was reportedly considering alternative partners if the situation didn't stabilize quickly. By Wednesday evening, the pressure had reached a crescendo. 3 more board members had expressed concerns about the merger's viability. 2 major institutional investors had requested private meetings to discuss leadership continuity. The stock price had dropped 4% since the gala photographs surfaced. Isabel sat in her office long after her staff had gone home, staring out at the city lights and trying to find a path through the impossible maze her life had become. On her desk lay 2 documents that represented her stark choices: a resignation letter that would clear the way for new leadership and preserve the merger, and a speech defending her right to make personal decisions without professional consequences. Her phone rang at 9 o'clock. William's voice was tired, lacking the commanding presence that usually defined their conversations. "Isabel, I need you to know that what I'm doing isn't personal. It's business. It's always business with you, isn't it? I've spent 40 years building this company. I won't let it be destroyed by sentiment. What if sentiment is what makes it worth building in the first place? Then we disagree on fundamental principles." "Yes, we do." There was a long pause filled with the weight of a relationship that had shaped both their lives and might not survive the next 24 hours. "If you choose him," William said finally, "there's no coming back from this. The board will never forgive the disruption. Your career in biotech will be over. And if I choose the company, then you secure the merger, save thousands of jobs, and fund research that could change the world. And lose the only man who's ever loved me for who I am instead of what I represent." Yes. The brutal honesty of his admission hung between them. He was asking her to sacrifice love for duty, personal happiness for professional legacy, her heart for her head. "I'll see you at the board meeting tomorrow," she said quietly. "Isabel." "Good night, Father." As she hung up, Isabel realized that her decision had already been made, not through calculation or strategic analysis, but through the simple recognition of what kind of person she wanted to be when this was all over. She picked up her phone and called Liam. "Hey," he answered on the first ring. "How are you holding up? I've made my choice. And I'm going to fight. For us, for the right to make my own decisions, for the principle that love doesn't make you weak, it makes you brave." The silence on the other end of the line stretched long enough to make her worry that he'd hung up. "Liam, I'm here, just processing the fact that you're willing to risk everything for this, for us. Are you having second thoughts? About us? Never. About whether I'm worth the price you're about to pay every minute. You're worth it. We're worth it. And if they can't see that, then they don't deserve to make decisions about my life. What do you need from me? Just be yourself. No matter what happens tomorrow, no matter what they say or what pressure they apply, just be the man who helped me remember what it feels like to be whole." Thursday morning dawned gray and cold, with the kind of October sky that promised winter was coming, whether anyone was ready or not. Isabel dressed carefully for the board meeting, choosing a navy suit that projected authority without aggression, pearl earrings that had belonged to her mother, and the vintage watch her father had given her when she graduated from Harvard Business School. As she prepared to leave for the office, Rosa appeared with a cup of coffee and an envelope that had been delivered by messenger. "From Senor Liam," Rosa said with a knowing smile. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a pencil sketch, the same kind of rough drawing she'd seen him make on napkins during their dinners together. But this one was different. It showed a woman in a wheelchair, but she wasn't sitting passively. She was in motion, arms raised, face turned toward the sky, hair flowing behind her as if she were flying. At the bottom, in Liam's careful handwriting, were 4 words: soar anyway, love L. Isabel felt tears threaten and carefully folded the paper, slipping it into her jacket pocket, where she could touch it during the meeting ahead. The Hartley Biotech boardroom occupied the entire 45th floor, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of Manhattan that were designed to remind everyone present of the scope of power and influence they wielded. 12 of the company's most successful and intimidating personalities sat around a table that had hosted decisions affecting millions of lives and billions of dollars. William sat at the head of the table, his expression carefully neutral, but Isabel could see the tension in his shoulders. To his right sat Margaret Chen, the venture capitalist who had provided crucial early funding, James Morrison, the senator's brother and a longtime family friend, Dr. Robert Hayes, former FDA administrator, and 8 others whose collective approval had shaped every major decision in the company's history. "Ladies and gentlemen," William began, "we're here to address concerns that have been raised about leadership stability during a critical period in the company's development." "Let's cut to the chase, William," Margaret Chen interrupted. "We're here because your daughter's personal life has become a distraction from the business at hand." "That's not entirely fair, Margaret," Dr. Hayes interjected. "Isabel's personal relationships shouldn't be subject to board oversight unless they directly impact company operations." "They do impact operations when they affect merger negotiations worth $8 billion, James Morrison said sharply. "My brother has expressed serious concerns about the optics of this relationship." Isabel listened to them discuss her life as if she weren't in the room, feeling the familiar burn of being treated as a problem, to be solved rather than a person with agency over her own decisions. "If I may," she said, standing up from her wheelchair, with the help of the table edge, a move that always commanded attention in rooms full of people who forgot she could stand at all. "I'd like to address these concerns directly." The room fell silent, 12 pairs of eyes focused on her, with varying degrees of sympathy, calculation, and hostility. "5 years ago, I rebuilt my life from the ground up after an accident that could have ended my career before it began. You gave me the chance to prove that leadership isn't about physical capabilities, it's about vision, determination, and the ability to make difficult decisions under pressure." She moved carefully around the table, making eye contact with each board member as she spoke. "Under my leadership, this company has achieved record growth, breakthrough research, and positioned itself for the largest merger in biotech history. I've done this while navigating challenges that none of you have faced, and I've done it successfully." "No one's questioning your professional competence, Isabel," Margaret said. "But personal judgment affects professional performance." "Does it?" "Because my personal judgment led me to pursue the Bayer-Kern merger when you all thought it was too ambitious. My personal judgment identified the research partnerships that have driven our growth. My personal judgment built this company into what it is today. Your personal judgment also led you to date a mechanic," James Morrison said with unconcealed disdain. "My personal judgment led me to choose a man who values integrity over influence, who builds things instead of destroying them, who sees potential instead of limitations." Isabel's voice grew stronger with each word. "The kind of man who reminds me why we do this work in the first place." "Pretty words," Morrison replied, "but they don't change the political reality. This relationship is affecting merger negotiations. Then maybe we should question why politics matters more than principles in our business decisions." William finally spoke, his voice carefully modulated. "Isabel, no one wants to interfere with your personal happiness. But we have obligations to shareholders, employees, and the patients who depend on our research. And I have obligations to myself, to the woman my mother raised me to be, to the values that make this company worth leading. She reached into her pocket, touching the folded paper that contained Liam's sketch. You're asking me to choose between love and duty, between personal happiness and professional responsibility. But that's a false choice. The man I love doesn't make me weaker, he makes me stronger. He doesn't distract me from my purpose, he reminds me what that purpose is. Isabel, William began. I'm not finished. She moved to the head of the table, facing down the most powerful people in her professional world. If you vote me out because I refuse to sacrifice my personal relationships for your political convenience, that's your choice. But you'll be losing a CEO who has delivered everything you've asked for and more. And if the merger falls through, Morrison asked, then we'll find another path forward. We'll build partnerships based on mutual respect rather than political intimidation. We'll create value through innovation rather than capitulation. The room was silent, except for the subtle hum of air conditioning and the distant sound of traffic 45 floors below. 12 people who controlled billions of dollars and thousands of jobs weighed her words against their own interests and fears. Margaret Chen spoke first. I move to table this discussion indefinitely. Isabel's personal life is irrelevant to her professional performance, and I won't be party to medieval thinking about women's autonomy. Seconded, Dr. Hayes said immediately. This is a mistake, Morrison said, but his voice lacked conviction. All in favor of tabling the discussion? William asked, his voice betraying no emotion. 7 hands rose around the table. 5 opposed. The motion carried. As board members filed out, some offering supportive words, others maintaining disapproving silence, William remained seated at the head of the table. You won, he said when they were alone. We all won. The company keeps its CEO, the merger stays on track, and I keep my dignity. The merger may still fail because of political pressure. Then we'll build something better. William looked at his daughter with an expression she couldn't quite read, part pride, part sorrow, part recognition that their relationship had shifted in ways that couldn't be undone. Your mother would be proud, he said quietly. I hope so. As Isabel left the boardroom, she felt lighter than she had in weeks. The battle wasn't over. There would be more challenges, more pressure, more attempts to force her to choose between love and duty. But she had drawn a line in the sand and defended it successfully. Her phone buzzed with a text from Liam. How did it go, Woto? She typed back, I'm still CEO, still stubborn and still crazy about a mechanic who draws beautiful sketches. Celebration dinner, my treat. Food truck. Always. As the elevator carried her down toward the lobby, Isabel realized that she had never felt more powerful than in this moment when she had refused to let power define her choices. She had chosen love over politics, authenticity over image, hope over fear, and somehow, against all odds, it felt like the beginning of everything rather than the end. The victory at the board meeting lasted exactly 18 hours. Isabel was reviewing merger documents in her office Friday afternoon when her assistant's voice came through the intercom with unusual urgency. Ms. Hartley, your father needs to see you immediately. He's in conference room A with some gentlemen from Washington. The phrase, gentlemen from Washington, sent ice through Isabel's veins. In her world, unexpected visits from federal officials meant one of two things: regulatory investigations or political pressure so severe it required personal delivery. She found William sighted across from 2 men in identical Navy suits, who radiated the particular brand of quiet authority that came with government badges and unlimited budgets. The older man, silver-haired with sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, stood as she entered. "Ms. Hartley, I'm Deputy Director Harrison from the FDA's Office of Strategic Initiatives. This is Agent Collins from the Department of Justice's Corporate Investigations Division." Isabel's throat went dry. The FDA handled drug approvals and medical device regulations. The DOJ handled criminal investigations into corporate malfeasance. Their combined presence suggested something catastrophic. "Gentlemen, please sit. How can Hartley Biotech assist you today?" Harrison opened a leather briefcase and removed a thick folder. "We're here about irregularities in your merger filing with Bayer Kern, specifically concerns raised by Senator Morrison regarding potential conflicts of interest and compromised decision-making at the executive level." "What kind of irregularities?" "Questions about whether personal relationships have affected your ability to make objective business decisions, whether outside influences have compromised the integrity of the merger process." Agent Collins spoke for the first time, his voice carrying the flat authority of someone accustomed to delivering life-changing news. "We've been asked to investigate whether your recent personal associations constitute a security risk that could affect the transfer of sensitive medical research to foreign entities." The room spun slightly around Isabel. They were using her relationship with Liam as grounds for a federal investigation into the merger. The political pressure she'd thought she could weather had just escalated into something that could destroy not just her career, but potentially result in criminal charges. "This is ridiculous," she said, struggling to keep her voice steady. "My personal relationships have no bearing on corporate security or merger compliance." "That's for us to determine," Harrison replied. "In the meantime, we're recommending that Bayer Kern suspend merger negotiations pending the outcome of our investigation." William's face had gone ashen. 40 years of building an empire, and it was crumbling because his daughter had chosen love over political expedience. "How long will this investigation take?" Isabel asked. 6 to 18 months, Collins said, "assuming we don't find evidence of actual wrongdoing, which would extend the timeline considerably." After the federal agents left, father and daughter sat in the empty conference room, surrounded by the wreckage of everything they'd built together. "This is exactly what I warned you about," William said, his voice hollow with defeat. "Morrison didn't just threaten to withdraw political support. He weaponized the entire federal bureaucracy against us. They can't actually believe that Liam represents a security risk. It doesn't matter what they believe. It matters what they can investigate, how long they can drag it out, and how much damage they can do in the process." Isabel stared out the window at the city she'd conquered and lost in the span of a week. 45 floors below, millions of people were living their lives, falling in love, making choices based on hope rather than fear. None of them would understand the weight of obligations that came with power, the way personal decisions became public property when enough money was at stake. "What do you want me to do?" she asked quietly. "End it. Publicly, definitively, immediately. Issue a statement saying you've realized the relationship was a mistake, that you're committed to focusing entirely on business responsibilities. And if I don't, then the investigation proceeds, the merger dies, and Hartley Biotech becomes a cautionary tale about mixing business with pleasure." That evening, Isabel sat in her penthouse apartment, staring at her phone as if it were a weapon she was afraid to use. The statement was already drafted, vetted by lawyers and public relations experts, designed to cauterize the wound before it became fatal. Ms. Isabel Hartley regrets that her recent personal relationships have become a distraction from Hartley Biotech's important work in medical research. She has decided to end these relationships and focus entirely on her professional responsibilities to shareholders, employees, and patients worldwide. 43 words. That would save $8 billion in research funding and destroy the only real happiness she'd found since her accident. Her phone rang. Liam's name appeared on the screen like a prayer she wasn't sure she deserved to answer. "Hey," she said, her voice cracking, despite her efforts to sound normal. "I saw the news about the federal investigation. How are you holding up?" "Not well. They're using our relationship as grounds to investigate the merger. Security concerns, conflicts of interest, compromised decision-making. That's insane. It's politics, and it's working." Liam was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications. "What do you need me to do?" The question was so simple, so trusting, that it broke something inside her chest. He was asking how he could help, not whether she planned to throw him under the bus to save her company. "I need you to understand something," she said, tears flowing freely now. "What I'm about to do isn't what I want. It's what I have to do." "Isabel." "They win, Liam. They win because they're willing to destroy innocent people to get what they want, and I'm not. So we fight them." "With what?" "They have the federal government unlimited resources and the willingness to tie this up in court for years. We have love and good intentions. Sometimes that's enough. Not in my world." The silence stretched between them, filled with everything they couldn't say, everything they were about to lose. "Are you asking me to walk away?" Liam finally asked. "I'm telling you that I have to walk away. From you, from us, from the best thing that's ever happened to me. To save the merger. To save the research funding that could help thousands of people. To preserve jobs for 30,000 employees. To keep my father's life's work from being destroyed because I was selfish enough to think I could have both love and responsibility." She could hear him breathing on the other end of the line, processing the weight of what she was saying. "When?" he asked quietly. "Tomorrow morning. There's going to be a press conference. Will you mean it when you say it was a mistake?" The question nearly destroyed her. "No, never. Not for a single second." "Then I'll know the truth even if nobody else does." After they hung up, Isabel sat in her apartment until dawn, memorizing the sound of his voice, the feeling of being loved for who she was, instead of what she represented. Tomorrow, she would become CEO Isabel Hartley again, all business and no heart. Exactly what the world expected her to be. But tonight, she was just a woman who had found love and was about to sacrifice it for duty. The press conference was scheduled for 10 o'clock in the Hartley Building's main lobby, a space designed to project corporate power and stability. Television crews from every major network filled the marble atrium, their lights turning the morning into artificial day. Isabel arrived early, reviewing her statement one final time while her public relations team made final preparations. The words felt like poison in her mouth, but she'd rehearsed them until they sounded almost natural. At 9:45, her assistant approached with news that stopped her heart. "Ms. Hartley, there's been an accident. A traffic incident involving Mr. Walker." The world tilted sideways. "What kind of accident?" "His truck was hit by a drunk driver around midnight. He's at Mount Sinai in surgery." The statement fell from Isabel's hands, forgotten. The merger, the investigation. The political pressure, none of it mattered if Liam was hurt. She was moving toward the elevator before conscious thought caught up with her actions. "Cancel the press conference," she told her assistant. "Ma'am, we can't cancel. The media is here, the federal investigation." "Cancel it, now, and get my car." The drive to Mount Sinai Hospital took forever and no time at all. Isabel's mind raced through worst-case scenarios while her heart hammered against her ribs like a caged bird. She'd been preparing to walk away from him to save her company, but the thought of losing him permanently made every corporate concern seem trivial. The ICU waiting room was a study in institutional beige, filled with the kind of people who'd learned that hospitals could either save your world or destroy it. Isabel found Tommy Liam's friend from the car service pacing by the windows. "How is he?" she asked without preamble. Tommy's face was haggard with exhaustion and worry. "Bad. Internal bleeding, broken ribs, head trauma. They've been operating for 6 hours." "What happened?" "Drunk driver ran a red light, T-boned his truck on the passenger side." If Liam had been sitting 6 inches to the right, Tommy's voice broke. "He was coming back from your neighborhood. I think he'd been driving around thinking." The guilt hit like a physical blow. While she'd been rehearsing her statement, preparing to publicly destroy their relationship, Liam had been driving the streets of Manhattan, probably trying to process what she'd told him. Ms. Hartley, a surgeon in scrubs, appeared, exhaustion etched into every line of his face. "I'm Dr. Rodriguez. Mr. Walker asked me to contact you if anything happened." "How is he?" "Stable but critical. We've repaired the internal bleeding and relieved pressure on his brain, but the next 24 hours will be crucial." "Can I see him?" "Family only, I'm afraid." "I'm his..." Isabel started to say fiancé, then realized she had no legal standing, no official relationship that would grant her access to the man she loved. "I'm all the family he has." Dr. Rodriguez studied her face, seeing something that made him nod. 5 minutes. He's heavily sedated, but some patients can hear voices even when unconscious. The ICU was a maze of machines and monitors, each beep and whir, marking the boundary between life and death. Liam lay in the center of it all, connected to tubes and wires that turned his strong body into something fragile and mechanical. His face was swollen, discolored by bruises that made him nearly unrecognizable. But his hands, those honest, capable hands that had fixed engines and drawn sketches and touched her face with infinite gentleness, those were unchanged. Isabel took his left hand in both of hers, careful not to disturb the IV line snaking into his wrist. "I'm here," she whispered. "I'm right here, and I'm not going anywhere." The machines continued their electronic symphony, measuring heartbeats and brain activity and the dozen other functions that kept him tethered to life. "I was going to give you up," she continued, tears falling onto their joined hands. "I was going to stand in front of cameras and tell the world that loving you was a mistake. But it's not a mistake, Liam. It's the only thing I've ever done that made complete sense." She stayed until the nurses insisted she leave, promising to return as soon as visiting hours allowed. Outside the hospital, reality reasserted itself in the form of 50 missed calls, text messages, and emails demanding to know why she'd canceled the press conference. Her father was waiting in her office when she finally returned to Hartley Biotech, his expression cycling between relief and fury. "Where the hell were you? The entire media establishment was waiting for your statement, and you just disappeared." "Liam was in an accident. He's in the ICU." William's anger evaporated, replaced by something that might have been concern. "Is he going to be okay?" "I don't know, they don't know." "Isabel, I'm sorry, but this doesn't change our situation. If anything, it makes it more urgent. The federal investigators are using your absence from the press conference as evidence of compromised judgment." "Then let them." "What does that mean?" Isabel moved to the window, looking out at the city, where ambulances carried broken people to hospitals and drunk drivers destroyed lives without consequence. Somewhere in that sprawl of concrete and steel, the man she loved was fighting for his life while she played political games with bureaucrats and board members. It means I'm done pretending that corporate success matters more than human connection. I'm done sacrificing the people I love for the approval of people who see me as a problem to be solved. You're talking about throwing away everything we've built. Everything you built. This was never my dream, Father. It was yours. And I've spent so many years trying to live up to your expectations that I forgot what my own dreams looked like. William sank into a chair, suddenly looking every one of his 68 years. Your mother and I built this company for you. Everything we sacrificed, every choice we made was so you could inherit something meaningful. Mother wanted me to be happy. She told me that on her deathbed, choose happiness over duty if I ever had to choose. She was dying. She wasn't thinking clearly. She was thinking more clearly than she ever had. And so am I. Isabel turned from the window facing her father with the kind of clarity that comes from nearly losing everything that matters. I'm resigning as CEO effective immediately. I'm withdrawing from the merger negotiations. And I'm going to spend whatever time Liam has left making sure he knows he's loved. Isabel, you can't be serious. I've never been more serious about anything in my life. The resignation letter was simple, direct, and devastating to everything William Hartley had spent 40 years building. As Isabel signed it, she felt simultaneously like she was destroying her life and saving it. The media response was immediate and brutal. Biotech heiress abandons empire for love, screamed the Post. The Times was more measured but equally damaging. Hartley CEO resigns amid federal investigation, citing personal priorities. The stock price plummeted 20% in after-hours trading. The federal investigation was suspended pending new leadership. The Bayer-Kern merger was officially terminated, taking $8 billion in research funding with it. Isabel ignored it all. She spent the next 3 days in the ICU waiting room, leaving only when forced by hospital policy. She read to Liam from books she found in the hospital gift shop, held his hand during procedures, and talked to him about everything and nothing. On the 4th day, he opened his eyes. Hey, he whispered, his voice hoarse from the breathing tube they'd removed that morning. Hey, yourself. Isabel felt tears of relief streaming down her face. How do you feel? Like I got hit by a truck, which according to the nurses is exactly what happened. Do you remember the accident? I remember driving around after we talked, thinking about everything you said. His eyes found hers still bright despite the pain medication. Did you really resign? I really resigned. For me, for us, for the chance to build something that matters more than stock prices and board meetings. Liam struggled to sit up, wincing as his broken ribs protested. Isabel, you can't give up everything for someone like me. I'm nobody special. You're wrong about that. You're the person who saw me as whole when everyone else saw me as broken. You're the person who taught me that love isn't a weakness, it's the only strength that matters. But the merger, the research funding, will happen eventually with or without me. But this only happens once. 2 weeks later, Liam was released from the hospital with strict instructions to rest and recover. Isabel had spent the time finding them a new place to live, not the Fifth Avenue penthouse that belonged to her old life, but a brownstone in Brooklyn Heights, with a view of the Manhattan skyline and room for both their dreams. The gesture that broke William Hartley's resistance came on a Tuesday evening in November. He arrived at their new home unannounced, carrying a bottle of wine and what looked like a peace offering. I came to apologize, he said, when Isabel answered the door. To both of you. Liam was in the living room, still moving carefully, but healing well. He looked up as William entered, wariness and curiosity battling in his expression. Mr. Hartley, This is unexpected. I owe you an apology, son. I judged you based on your bank account instead of your character. That was wrong. You were protecting your daughter and your company. I understand that. No, you don't understand. I was protecting my own ego, my own vision of what success should look like. William turned to Isabel. Your mother would be ashamed of how I handled this. She always said that love was the only investment that guaranteed returns. What changed your mind? Isabel asked. Dr. Chen called me yesterday. Apparently, she's been working with some colleagues at Stanford to develop a new research foundation. Independent, privately funded, focused specifically on spinal cord research. William reached into his jacket and pulled out a legal document. They want you to head it up. Full autonomy, unlimited research budget, and a mission statement that prioritizes patient care over profit margins. Isabel stared at the papers, hardly daring to believe what she was reading. How is this possible? Turns out a lot of people were disgusted by what happened to you. Major donors, research institutions, even some pharmaceutical companies that believe medicine should be about healing people, not playing politics. What about Hartley Biotech? The company will survive. It always has. But it doesn't need you to sacrifice your happiness for its success. As William prepared to leave, he paused at the door. Liam, I need to ask you something. Yes, sir. Are you going to marry my daughter? Liam glanced at Isabel, something passing between them that William couldn't quite read. If she'll have me. Then you have my blessing. And my apologies for taking so long to offer it. 6 months later, on a warm May evening, Walker Automotive hosted the most unusual wedding reception in Brooklyn's history. The garage had been transformed with string lights and flowers, creating an atmosphere that was part elegant celebration, part neighborhood block party. The ceremony itself had taken place on the beach in Montauk, where Liam had carried Isabel into the waves for the first time since her accident. The photos showed her laughing with pure joy as salt water swirled around them, supported by the man who'd taught her that love wasn't about overcoming limitations. It was about discovering possibilities. Now surrounded by friends from both their worlds, they danced to jazz music, while mechanics in bow ties served champagne next to research scientists in vintage dresses. Dr. Chen gave a toast about the intersection of love and scientific discovery. Tommy told embarrassing stories about Liam's bachelor days. Even William made a speech about learning that the best mergers happened between hearts, not corporations. As the evening wound down and guests began filtering out into the Brooklyn night, Isabel and Liam found themselves alone in the garage, where they'd first really talked about the future. Any regrets? He asked, spinning her wheelchair in a gentle circle that made her laugh. About giving up $1 billion company to marry a mechanic. Not for a second. Even when you're running a revolutionary research foundation, and I'm still changing oil filters, especially then, someone has to keep your feet on the ground while I'm changing the world. They moved to the open garage door, looking out at the Manhattan skyline, where lights twinkled like stars. Somewhere in that maze of steel and glass, the Chen Foundation for Spinal Cord Research was developing treatments that could help millions of people. Somewhere else, Hartley Biotech continued its work under new leadership, proving that companies could survive the departure of even their most essential people. I have something for you, Liam said, reaching into his jacket pocket. We already exchanged rings. This is different. He handed her a small canvas the size of a paperback book covered in oil paint that was still slightly tacky. The painting showed 2 figures dancing, but these weren't the formal portraits found in art galleries. This was raw, emotional, alive with movement and joy. The woman in the wheelchair had her arms raised toward the sky, her face radiant with laughter. The man beside her was looking at her, as if she contained all the light in the world. "It's beautiful," Isabel whispered, tears blurring her vision. "It's us, the real us, not the version other people see." She studied the painting, seeing herself through his eyes, not as a disabled CEO or a fallen heiress, or a woman who'd chosen love over duty, but simply as someone worthy of being loved completely. "What does it mean?" she asked. "It means we did it. We figured out how to dance together no matter what the music sounds like or who's watching or what they think about our technique." As they sat in the doorway of the garage surrounded by the tools of Liam's trade and the dreams of their shared future, Isabel realized that this was what happiness looked like. Not the glossy perfection of magazine covers or the sterile success of corporate achievements, but the messy, complicated, beautiful reality of two people who'd chosen each other against all odds. The city hummed around them, full of other love stories beginning and ending, other dreams being born and buried. But this story, their story, was just beginning. Tomorrow, Isabel would return to her lab to continue research that could change lives. Liam would return to his garage to fix engines and employ people who needed second chances. And every evening they would come home to each other, to the life they'd built from hope and stubbornness and the radical belief that love was worth fighting for. On the beach in Montauk, Liam had helped Isabel take her first steps in the sand since her accident. The doctors called it impossible, but they'd done it anyway, not because miracles happened, but because love made people brave enough to attempt impossible things. Now, as the Brooklyn night settled around them, and the last of their wedding guests headed home, they danced one more time to music only they could hear. And for the first time in either of their lives, the future felt not like something to survive, but something to celebrate. "Ready to go home, Mrs. Walker?" Liam asked. "I am home," Isabel replied, and she meant it completely. The garage door rolled down behind them as they headed toward their new life together, but the string lights continued to twinkle through the windows, casting dancing shadows on the walls where love had triumphed over every obstacle except the simple, radical act of choosing happiness. In the morning, newspapers would report on other stories, other people, other dramas that seemed more important than a mechanic and a former CEO who'd found each other across impossible distances. But somewhere in Brooklyn, two people would wake up next to each other and know that they'd won the only game that mattered. They'd learned to dance,